Hey everybody, and thanks for joining us on another live stream of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. This is Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Zimmerman.
Hello.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hi.
And we're happy that you're joining us live, so then you can ask your questions. You can do that on Facebook or YouTube, however you're watching this. And you can do that just in the comments down below. And then after we record this normal podcast episode, we'll get into answering the questions that you've submitted. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things today. We have some exciting stuff coming up with a live podcast as well that we can announce for all of you guys coming up. Guests to be determined. But we'll go through all of that once we actually record the proper podcast, so then everybody can hear about it. I guess if you are watching live, feel free to share the link, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook. You can share that out right now, so then other people, other cyclists and triathletes like you, can join us and ask their questions or get their questions answered. And with that, we'll kick off the proper podcast. Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Zimmerman.
Hi, buddy.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
And this is where we answer your cycling and triathlon related questions. Nate, I felt like you paused as if you wanted to add on more to your hello.
Nope.
Okay, got it. And you can submit those at trainerroad.com/podcast. We'll go through those questions every week, and then we put them into a feed, and then we prepare ourselves so then we can answer these the best possible manner. If you are not, or if you don't know, you can join us live, and you can do that on Facebook or YouTube. Usually it's Thursdays at 8 a.m. Pacific, and you can watch if you want to do such a thing, but you can watch all three of us, and you can also ask your questions live. And then after we record this podcast, we take some time to answer those, so you can join us for that. Also, we have something called the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast Facebook group, and it's where thousands, I think it's somewhere over 6,000 or something like that right now, of you podcast listeners are in there constantly sharing questions or things that are working for you. So then everybody else chimes in. It's a pretty cool community on there that you can check out. So you can join that. You'll also you'll be privy to some, I guess, behind the scenes stuff with the podcast and everything we do here at Trainer Road on that too. And Nate, we should also mention about the other Facebook group that we have, the Trainer Road Beta Testers group, and the new calendar stuff, right?
Yeah, so some people got confused last week. The new calendar that we're working on is not released yet. It is in a closed beta, meaning that if you go to that group, there's a sign-up form, the Trainer Road Beta Testers Facebook group, long name. Mm-hmm. And then if you apply there, we're adding people in batches.
Right.
And then that's going to launch soon. So it's not launched yet, just so everyone knows.
Do we want to share any details this week about it, or do we want to just keep it at that?
Let's just keep it closed until we share them all.
Cool. I like that.
Well, last week I already shared a bunch, but
We're excited.
Yeah, you can have other types of workouts. I'm going to do it anyways. You can plan outside workouts. You can plan running and swimming and lifting. You can do Trainer Road workouts. You can add training plans. You can switch training plan days around. So you can say, instead of doing Tuesday, Thursdays, I want to go Wednesday, Fridays, Sundays.
It's awesome.
You can cut training plans up and add them. It's pretty neat.
I started my training this week. I'm back at it again. Yesterday was 30 minutes of taku, which is one of our workouts. This
is like the people who I started my diet today. Oh. I had water with lunch. Like a little thing. Yeah, this is it, guys.
Guys, I could not stop smiling during the workout. It just felt so good to actually be training again. So
it just seems weird.
I know, it seems super weird, but yeah, man, take 3 months completely off and you'll feel it, man. That's for sure. So yeah, I'm excited to get back into it. I've been using the calendar for that very thing and shifting things around. So
yeah, every day. Every day I change my plan just a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, I really sucked yesterday. I better.
It's nice to be able to do that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's, I guess all taken care of there rather than bringing in pad and paper with a calendar, you know what I mean? And
I used Excel before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but being extremely rigid and just sticking to your calendar because it says what it says is one of the most common causes of overtraining. People just won't be flexible because that's what my calendar says. But if we can make it a little easier for them to move stuff around, hopefully that'll assist.
Yeah, it'll be pretty sweet. Some congratulations are in order for Team Clif Bar.
It's big.
Yeah, so they won the USA Crit Series, the team challenge, which is friggin' awesome. I want to say Zach Allison may have won, but he may have gotten second. I saw conflicting things. So, and then the Malherbe brothers, they did fantastically well. I think that they were right behind Zach in the overall standing. So super impressive. I think it was Kevin, it could be Connor Malherbe, the one of the twins. They were in the laps led jersey, I think all the way through the whole season. So they led more laps than anybody else. Nice. Honestly, this was like domination by Clif Bar. So like if we were a radio show, we'd be like inserting the claps right now.
So what is the USA Crit series?
It used to be called like the NRC series basically, and it's the premier criterium series in the United States.
Yep.
It involves all the big criteriums that you would hear of.
So these are the same guys that we interview all the time here.
Yeah.
And they sound so chill, and then they
know.
go out and win.
And we've even had people like, I remember one guy, YouTube commenter, I'm thinking of you, whoever you were, who was like, these guys look fat. They're not even fast. I'm probably faster than these guys. And it's like, man, you just don't get it. Like these athletes are like, they're next level. And in a discipline like criterium racing specifically, they have their priorities in line, which is power, and then your racing nous, like your ability to be able to, act and do the appropriate things within the race.
When I went to the Clif Bar team camp and we were doing a climb, and I was with two of the guys, and Zach being one of them, he's the guy who then kicked out at like 600 watts after we had been pegging it for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, see you later.
Yeah.
He's really, really fast.
Insanely fast. And he does a bunch of stuff in the Colorado area too with like bike fitting and plenty of different things too. So like if you're in that region, he's not just a guy that like, offers those services, but obviously he's really freaking fast. So he really knows what he's doing with it too. So a pretty cool guy. So congrats to Team Clif Bar. I think they're going to be all here for Interbike. So we'll probably end up getting a handful of those guys in and we'll end up doing a podcast with them. And then if you listen to the podcast that we did from Leadville, you heard Alex Grant, who Gear Rush, that's who he rides for Gear Rush in Cannondale. And he won Park City Point to Point, which is a race that continues to be not as well known as it should be. I've never heard a single person that has done that and Leadville and said that Leadville is harder. Everybody says that Point to Point is way harder. It's 75 miles, so it's not as long. I think it's 7,500 feet up to almost 10,000 feet roughly, the course profile. But it's, I think, all but like 1.02 miles is single track. And, there's never a single like just straight flat section. It's constantly undulating. But he beat Jeff Kabush, Russell Finsterwald, Robbie Squire, a whole bunch of fast, like Ben Sontag. Yeah, and 10,000. I think over 10,000 feet. Yeah, in 75 miles.
So it's cool that Alex was just on the podcast for our Leadville prep.
Yeah.
So we've got two winners.
Yeah, right.
We know how to pick them.
Yeah.
So if anyone else wants to win a major race,
just come on the podcast.
Exactly.
So yeah, good job, Alex. Way to go, man. That's a hard race. And if anybody's looking for like, especially like we were talking last week about. I called it dessert, but that's kind of like that contingency race, just in case your A race goes bad. And Park City Point to Point falls late enough in the year that it could be that sort of thing. I tried it last year. It was a little too close to the concussion. One of the coolest courses I've ever ridden, even just halfway through. So it's pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet event. With that, let's get into some questions. First one says, any advice on mentally recovering from a bad race? Today was my 90-mile race, and my goal was 4 hours, and I ended up finishing in 4 hours and 50 minutes. The wave I was in was a 20 to 21 mile an hour average, which would have kept my watts low for the first half. And he says today we were averaging 23 to 26 miles per hour. He says we were just a very poor functioning group. My carb loading went well the 2 days prior, and he says my onboard fueling was also sufficient, I think. In total, I consumed about 1,500 calories on the bike between the bottles and the gels and everything else. I was on top of taking a bottle and drink about every 10 minutes, whether I felt I needed to or not. He says by mile 50, I had cramps in my legs so bad that I spent the rest of the day biking by myself. Other than taking some time off, because this is pretty much the one race a year that I do. Says, is there anything else that I can do to make my next year's ride or my ride next year any better? So he pointed out a handful of different things, but like kind of the main principle that we want to get at is when you have races that don't go as you plan, which is definitely the case.
It's gonna happen.
We were talking about it,
probably.
like Chad, how you were saying that, if you have 10 races, chances are, 5 of those won't go according to plan.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you put all your eggs in that single basket, you're setting yourself up as a kind of a pass or fail. I mean, total success or not total failure, but it's kind of goes one way or the other. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of shades of gray here.
Can we talk about maybe why we think he performed bad first and then talk about the mental aspect afterwards?
Yeah, because I think that's the process that needs to happen here.
Yep.
If you just say, oh, it was a bad race, and then you just look forward without actually analyzing why it was a bad race, then you've missed the learning opportunities that can help you for next time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to start, Chad?
Yeah, just the one thing that struck me initially was that he talks about eating whether he was thirsty or drinking whether he was thirsty or not, eating whether he was hungry or not. And with drinking, maybe not as much of a concern, but with eating, I mean, depending on how hard he's working and how carb loaded he came into this, just because you're eating consistently doesn't mean that nutrition is making it to your muscles. It also doesn't mean it's clearing the gut. So if you're just piling food on food that's just sitting in your gut, further dehydrating your body so the digestion is slowing even more, you're certainly not getting that water out to the muscles where they need it. Oxygen transport is going to suffer as a consequence. Performance is going to tank. On top of it all, you may layer intestinal distress on all of that. So eating just for the sake of eating, I know if you have a plan going into it, maybe it makes sense and you've tested this out. If you haven't tested it out, though, and you're kind of trying to come up with it in a game day scenario, these are the consequences you can suffer. So maybe that was an issue.
Maybe.
I see a lot of people making that error when they don't have experience at eating enough in races, and they get into a situation where they just forget to eat, and then they don't eat enough, and then they have that problem.
Or they eat too much for fear of running out of gas.
Yeah, and so like I guess that's where I would see that strategy implemented, which is eating just to eat, and you kind of eat by the numbers. That's if you really can't gauge it well otherwise.
Yeah, and if you back that up in your training, and for me to work this hard at this intensity and this heat, et cetera, I know I have to ingest this many calories coming in.
It's also the type of food. So the math was like around 300 calories an hour. I find personally now, like, it was weird. I was bad on SIS gels, and now I like super duper love them. Yeah. But that's much easier for me to absorb than like a bar.
Oh, totally.
Right,
yeah,
and like chew that down. Yeah. I used to be really into bonk breaker bars, but it's just harder to digest.
Maybe
and I believe
Well,
yeah, exactly, at lower intensities. But this is a race. So that's another thing I want to talk about. Is sometimes, like, especially this one, it sounds like his performance was going to be a little bit group dependent. Because he said he was in a very poor functioning group. Yeah. I've been in 4 poor functioning groups. What happens, you get frustrated, you get to the front, you start pulling harder, right? Because you want the group to speed up, and then maybe that makes you more, instead of steady, get more spiky.
More surgy.
And that's a great way to lead to cramps later on.
Oh, yeah.
Is to just cook your muscles over and over and over again, trying to organize the group.
Especially in an unfamiliar way. I mean, if you train like this and this is the way you ride all the time, it's not outside of your wheelhouse. So you go into it and maybe you can make that work for you. But if it doesn't sound like that's what you trained for, you were expecting a cohesive group so that you guys could sail along at a particular speed, sharing even turns. Yeah. And that's not what happened.
No, I find that that's a really tricky thing if you're going into a race like that and that you're depending upon a consistent pace, and unless you're bringing a whole posse with you to make sure that happens, that's kind of a tricky thing because there's too much out of your control.
It's rolling the dice.
It really is.
I find that if it's like a breakaway, sometimes yelling does work, or being like, come on, do this. But then if it's like a bigger group and not like the most competitive, like you're off the front, it's almost like positive encouragement. Like, totally, you can do it. Like, take those. Okay, now pull off. Great job. Great pull.
Yeah, you have to manage the psychology of the group.
You don't want to just get to the front though and be like, we need to speed up. Hammer it 400 watts.
That is the
drop everybody. Group, Everyone slows down.
Yeah. I think that, like you said, managing the psychology of the group. Somebody has to take that role on many times because the group will not have strong enough leadership.
Yeah, and that sounds like this is what was lacking here. If he said a very poor functioning group, obviously no one was willing to take up those reins or didn't have the capability or the experience.
And not every group needs a leader. A lot of times it just flows in. Case in point, Clif Bar Team Camp, there was no leader needed in any of the times we're in a group.
That's a higher level of rider, though.
Well, obviously.
But that's what you see, though. Generally, with lower level riders, you need that sort of leadership role because people don't know what to do and how to consider everybody else's abilities.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a jerk about it. You can be the guy who educates, shows these less experienced riders, here's how this can work better.
I remember first racing 10 years ago and people doing that. One local guy, Dan Brown, he was so encouraging, would tell me to do stuff and just would say, good job. And I learned so much from that. And our little groups got so much faster.
And I think if you're the person that's taking the initiative to be the leader, what you can do that's of more value than telling everybody what to do is to find out what they can and want to do. And then, finding the best way to work with that if you do have a group like that.
Yeah, and the honest doesn't necessarily onus.
Yeah.
Onus doesn't necessarily fall on your shoulders, anonymous.
Yeah.
You can just remove yourself from the group. If you don't feel like maybe you have the experience or not even the desire to lead this group, well, extricate yourself from it. Just fall back to the next group, accelerate forward to the group ahead. Your options are there.
Yeah, if the group isn't performing like you want to, rather than sticking in it and then hoping that it's somehow going to change or get better, many times you're just much better off finding a different group.
I think in this case probably would have been.
Hopefully it's possible.
Because, you end up riding alone anyways, so why not ride alone a little earlier without having spent your valuable muscle stores and see if you can figure out a better scenario for you.
Yeah, it could be hard, though.
Yeah.
At 21, you're there's lots of drag on aero drag.
There is, yeah, that's for sure. And it's also hard because sometimes you just don't have another group to go with. Like, if a person's listening to this and thinking of the local weekend ride where it's really one group,
sure.
It's tricky. That can happen. But I think that depending on your goals, if this is your A race, which in this case it was, right? Like, this is the big race of the year, and that's a little bit different. You might be willing to make certain sacrifices, but you have to keep in mind the cost, like you said, of pushing so hard early on and cooking yourself.
Yeah.
You really have to know your limits and be able to stay within them. I guess one thing you touched on before we got into the rearward looking analysis on this is just one A race and having that pressure of that. Mm-hmm. I'm actually putting myself in that situation for the coming year, right? And I'm trying to do as much as I can to mitigate all the different risks or potential risk and kind of bring it into my control, but. That's a huge thing that doesn't just mean that, you have one shot, and if that one shot gets blown, that's it. But it also changes the way that you end up behaving leading up to that race and your training and the race, at least I find. So if you do have the option of having that dessert race, so to speak, thereafter, or spreading it out over a couple races, I can't help but think that you might be in a better spot to make those decisions to hang back with that other group that's a little slower and actually end up having a better day because you aren't putting all the pressure on yourself.
It's a strong case for practice races too, or just tune-up races or lower priority races. The things that are going to involve all the elements of your A priority race, but just with lesser consequence.
Yeah. So I guess looking forward now.
Yeah, so let's just say for some reason you had a bad race.
Yeah.
It could be any reason. Could be your fault, not your fault. But I've had bad races.
How do you bounce back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you do?
I guess, Chad, do you want to start with that?
You guys are as adept or as...
We're better at doing bad races. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying.
So it's like, it's never happened to me.
This is a scenario that applies to all of us. You don't have to be a coach to be able to figure this stuff out.
Okay, I'm going to start then.
Okay.
My worst race that was my A race was my first Ironman. I had a bunch of problems. I honestly think I didn't eat enough. I had this thing. I was listening to this other podcast guy. I won't say his name. He's a snake oil guy. You probably know who he is. And I was like, I am gluten intolerant. I'm tired. I must be gluten. And I'm like, I can't eat any gluten. So I didn't eat any carbs leading up to it. And then during the race, I was like, does it have gluten in it? I can't eat that. And it was like a huge slog. And I performed so poorly. I think it was relative to my fitness. I did a half a few months earlier, and it was like 4:56 or something like that. And then at my race day at Ironman, it was like 12:47, 12:37. So it was, I think, more like around 11 and a half or 11:15 would have been good for me. But anyways, the thing that was great for me is 1 week later, I did a sprint try, no pressure. Forgot about the whole I'm gluten intolerant.
Just crushed it.
I got second overall, the fastest ever done any all splits. It was a very small sprint,
right.
But it was still. That was actually, there was going from Ironman where it's like the pomp and circumstance of like, sure. It's such a big event.
Yeah, if you haven't done one, they're quite an impressive event.
And this one, my transition sprint was on the back of my car.
Really?
Yeah. There wasn't even a transition area. It was just everyone leaned their bikes against their car, and that for me, that got me in like, hey, I'm not as bad as I.
It was an opportunity to get your mojo back.
Yeah, it's like
your confidence.
I can do this, and everything clicked. So having that other race that didn't matter, and I didn't have any. I wasn't stressed out. An Ironman, your first Ironman, you're not sleeping. Like you're really scared.
Yeah. Well, it's type A.
At least I'm scared.
You don't even have to have an event lined up either. I mean, after a race goes poorly, dig something up. You've got a high level of fitness. I mean, if you trained well, tapered well, and you are, in some respects, all respects, peaking. the fitness is there, so you might as well spend it on something, especially if the event that mattered most to you tanked.
Yeah, I find that we're really good at, and it's a bad thing, but us type A athletes are very good at tying our self-worth into our race results.
That's because you do all this, you spend all this time and money.
It forms a big part of your identity. I mean, it's a lot of personal resources to devote to something that eventually goes poorly.
Your performance very much is you, because I mean you've put so much into it, right? But it's very easy for us to then, because of a bad performance, that could be for any number of reasons, but it's very easy for us to put all the blame on ourselves.
Yeah.
And, to your point, Chad, of kind of like, I guess, trusting in the training, I would say, as long as you know that, or as long as the training comes from a veritable source and it's, it was well executed and it wasn't, done poorly in any way, that's one thing that I sit back and I know that my training's on track, right? So when I look at that, I sit back and instead of questioning everything that I'm doing, I say, hey, I know that I've done this work and I know that that's brought my fitness to this point. Like I may not have executed on the day for one reason or another, but the fitness is there. The training has been proper. I followed through on that. Take confidence in that. And then hopefully you can have another event because that really helps. But if not, because I've had situations where, we've talked about it plenty of times on the podcast, but I was super fit for marathon national championships. And then my wheel, wasn't sanded down on the edge from the factory and ended up slicing my tire. And I had 3 flats and a long hike instead of a good bike race. Right. So in that situation, I didn't have really a follow-up race after that because there was just a dearth of races locally. But what I did is I sat back and I just said, well, you know what? Take confidence in what you've done and then replan for the next year and try to isolate things. I think a big mistake, though, that people make with this, this is kind of like my ending note on this one for me, is people don't analyze what went wrong. And instead, what they do is they just chalk it up to it just happens, or it was somebody else's fault when it may be yours, or it was my fault when it may be, something else. You really have to just figure out what went wrong.
So that's a great point. And I think sometimes it's very figure-outable.
Yeah.
You like that word?
I like it. Great word. Yeah.
Like I crashed my Chico thing. I was like, I should have been in a different spot in the group, or instead of third wheel, I should have been off the front. I don't know. But I think in your mechanical, that's easy. Me not eating during an Ironman kind of thing, that's easy. I think too sometimes though, the poop does actually just sometimes happen.
That's what I was going to say. There are some things that are within your control and there's some things that aren't.
Well, I think so there are things I think that are hard to measure and figure out. And I wonder how many times people get maybe a little virus or something that doesn't fully express itself, but also lowers your performance by 3, 4, or 5%.
Even less than that.
You start a race, you start pacing at what your normal pace would be, and then you just tank and die. And you're I just didn't feel like I had it today. Well, and you don't really, it's hard to measure that, right? And figure out what that is.
Peak fitness is a delicate balance too. I mean, you're trying to bring your fatigue down without sacrificing fitness. I mean, you've ratcheted your training up to a point where your fitness is at its highest, which, takes a serious toll on your immune function. So stuff like that is absolutely feasible. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of people have pushed through their A event in a semi-sick state.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's my biggest fear when it comes down to that point of season is something like that. And like you said, it can be really hard to identify. And it's also very easy to misattribute, I guess, that to something else, to be able to take it or to sit there and say, it was this, or it was because my taper was bad, or it was because I didn't eat enough, or I didn't do something like that. So the best approach is to make sure that if you are measuring as much as you can and keeping track of as much as you can coming in, it should make it easier, ideally, to be able to ward out false positives when you're, if
you're going to be analytical about any one thing, make it your post-race analysis, especially in the case of a race that didn't go as you wanted it to.
Yeah. That's why I like race reports. Sorry, one thing on this, like race reports, I see, none of us really love to read other people's race reports. It's not like it's not something that we love to do, right?
My mom read my race report for my first marathon. She said it was interesting.
Just your first one, though. Probably after that, she dropped off. like even our mothers would do that,
that's
right?
Interesting, honey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good job. But the thing about a race report is for the individual, and it's it can be cathartic, or it can be helpful in helping a person actually walk through and gaining a different perspective, perhaps, on their performance. And I think that's something that you should always work through that. And bless my wife, when we are driving back from races, I usually run through an audible whole thing.
Poor Sarah.
If nobody was in the car, that would say that. But bless her for saying yep. As I'm going through things.
Post-race reports for your coach.
It's
if
huge.
That coach is you, then it's you. But get it on paper. I mean, get something tangible from it.
Yep, it really does help. And I've always found that in the heat of the moment in competition, I'm not very good at analyzing things with a fair perspective, right? Like I lose perspective. But then afterward, it's amazing what, taking a couple hours after that race and, getting some food in you, getting properly hydrated again, it's amazing how your perspective can change and you can actually see things fairly.
That's true. I used to take my race numbers and flip them over and write the 3 things I got right, the 3 things I got wrong. Just in my earliest days. It sounded like a smart thing to do, and I did it for a while. And I go back over those, and there's actually some really good information on them. I'm kind of sorry I stopped doing it.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Jonathan with the other writers actually film the crits and then go through them minute by minute in voiceover. That's even better.
Everyone's race.
Yeah, exactly.
That is thorough. Yeah.
One thing I also want to say about the sickness and being a high level of fitness, that marathoners, they actually have like a term called the taper flu, where they load their body up on stress. That lowers their immune system. They actually have some kind of like virus or something in them.
Yeah.
And then when they start tapering, their immune system is not as suppressed and it starts to fight back. Yeah. And then that's when they get the stuffy nose and feeling sick. And that's really it's not the virus that's like making you have a stuffy nose. It's your immune system that's doing that as it fights the sickness.
Yeah, those heavy training loads, your body's teeming with catabolic hormones, and it's not the sort of position you want to be in heading into a very demanding event.
Right. Yeah, it's a really tricky balance to run.
So yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying it's common that at the beginning of a taper after a really big load that you feel kind of sick.
Sure.
And then the key point is not to make it you get fully sick, that you just at the beginning of your taper you feel great after a few days, and then you can do your marathon or big race.
So one thing we didn't talk about this is if you crash during that race, and that actually is a
segue.
There we are into Kate's question. And Kate, we apologize because this is far too late. But hopefully we can, all, I guess, just glean some information that can be useful from this experience, and we hope it went well for you. But you'll see why I preface. But Kate says, "Gentlemen of Trainer Road, thank you so much for putting on this podcast. It makes my week, and I love incorporating your advice into my training. That being said, I need some serious advice. I've been training for the one-day ride across Michigan, which originally I didn't think it would be too tough. I've been building my base and even joined Trainer Road to more effectively train for this event. It's my first group cycling event. I just started cycling on a road bike in March and April." That's ambitious for just starting, and then you're going to ride across a whole state.
Be like, it's not so hard.
Kate's a serious athlete, I have a feeling, right?
She's either brave or stupid. Just kidding, Kate. Or maybe it's Katie.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not sure. Then she says, "Everything was on track until a couple days ago when I crashed. I was going downhill at about 40 miles an hour when I hit a pothole and my front tire went flat. Handlebars are in pieces, shifters in pieces, and of course I am shredded. Significant road rash and bruising on my whole left side with some lacerations that were too messy to suture. My wonderful boyfriend has put my bike back together, and there's about a week left to train." So this was obviously in the past year, but she says, "How do I get my confidence back for this ride, and how do I train for the next week?" So I think that we're going to kind of take her question and flip it really quickly. As far as how to train for the next week, let's cover that part first, and then we'll get into how to get the confidence back. Because I think that when you are injured like that, and this is pretty severe, like that's a lot of trauma to the body.
Yeah, that's going to be determined by the level of injury. So obviously you're able to ride your bike, but your body is still healing from a whole lot of abuse. So I don't think you can do anything but sit on the bike and pedal easily. There's no fitness to be gained at this point if you're 1 week out. First off, all you should be doing is recovering anyway. Your body's in a sad state and needs to heal. You pile training stress on top of that, and it's only going to slow that process, which is going to send you into your event in an even more fatigued and injured state than you'd otherwise be. So I don't think there's much to do over the course of that week except for convalesce. Just try to heal.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to peak fitness, like for a big event. My goal kind of switches to just putting my body in the best place it can be. I'm not necessarily, worried about building fitness. I'm not worried about anything else like that. I just want my body to be in the best spot that it can be, right? And if I think about it, if I add in, training to the mix when my body's just trying to recover, I'm not allowing it to get into the best place it can be. So that's at least my perspective when I go into those situations.
Right. And even in that situation, the biggest concern she would have is that she might feel a little flat on race day. Well, after a hard crash like that, you're not going to feel great anyway. So you might as well let your body heal, deal with the flatness, and just hope that you can reap some of the benefit of a week's worth of recovery.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess getting confidence back for something like this after a crash.
That's a tough thing.
40 miles an hour hits a pothole. I guess the same principles apply in some respect, that you have to analyze what went wrong, or else you'll have an irrational fear.
Let me just state one thing. There's two types of bike racers, ones who've crashed and ones who are going to, or just haven't crashed yet. But it is a matter of time. No one's going to ride their bike for any length of time without having a crash, whether it's a minor one or a more severe one.
Mm-hmm.
That's
true.
I think crashes should get broken down into two different categories. One are ones that were your fault and you could have prevented, and one that are freak accidents. Mm-hmm. And I heard something a while ago, it was on some NPR episode, but they're talking about people getting over like traumatic things when they were driving, and actually people who are drunk drivers and then they killed somebody, they had an easier time getting over it because they could say, it was because I was drunk, I can just never eat again, than someone never drink again, never eat. Than people who would say, who killed someone where it was just a fluke accident, someone stepped out right in front of their car when they shouldn't have, because they don't know when it's going to happen any single time.
Highly unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this one, could we maybe talk about first how to avoid this in the first place?
Totally.
So was she on a descent?
Yeah,
40 miles.
Like 40 miles.
Yeah, unless she's really strong.
Insanely strong.
40 mile per hour flat.
So going high speed, depending on, especially when we were at Levi's Grand Fondo, I remember you were constantly commenting on the fact that it was so hard to see.
It was difficult. I mean, it's spots of shade, spots of sun, bright sun into dark shade.
I'm going to break it down into a few different sections. First, let's say it's perfectly sunny, going 40.
Yep.
Where do you look, Jonathan?
I'm looking, as your speed increases, the distance at which you're gazing also increases.
Farther,
It gets further up the road.
Yeah, you're always looking as far up the road as you can. As far up the road as you can see, and then scanning back to your front wheel. Back up the road, back to your front wheel.
Yeah.
And then also, I would be looking at a rider in front of me, give them enough room. Mm-hmm. Like there's this, you don't want to be so close because sometimes riders don't see stuff to the last minute. They miss it and you hit it.
Yep.
But I found like with Jonathan, if he's like, especially on the fast descents, if you're 10 lengths in front of me, there's enough time for me to react. But Jonathan's also looking, so I'm kind of following, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm kind of following you too.
That's a trust issue though. I mean, a lot of time you can't trust the rider in front of you. Mm-hmm. So you're always looking around them. You're not looking at them.
Well, this is when he's really far ahead. Yeah. And at least I know that like if he freaks out, I have enough time, even if he's not a good rider.
Yeah, and you'll see that. I mean, don't get me wrong. The peloton is very tight and travels very quickly in grand tours that you see in big races. But you'll see that when it really gets into a tricky descent or where there's doubt, you'll see if they spread out and they give each other room, and they are not right on each other's wheels. No, it's
far too risky.
Let's talk. Okay, so now let's say there's one situation where you're in the shade, which I find is not as hard as the third situation where it goes sunny to shade, sunny to shade.
Yeah.
That is, you're blinded. And that can be very scary.
That's just pray for the best sort of scenario.
The one thing and I know that this is going to sound like a product plug, but I think of lenses that are specifically made for the environment in which you're riding. So
that's what I was going to say.
POC and Oakley both have lenses like this. And we've used lenses from both companies, and I think all three of us agree that we do notice actually a substantial difference. Mm-hmm. I've used the road lenses, the ones made for that. I've used the ones made for for trail. Then I've also, POC has some that I'm trying right now that are made for cloudy days on trail, very specific. But
wow.
And I do notice a difference when you use those. And basically all those do is they just increase contrast for specific colors is what they go for. And the colors that you'll be experiencing in those environments.
I believe the trail ones too don't have as much like tinting.
Correct. Yeah.
So I've used the trail ones on the road when it goes from light to dark, because that's what it's made for.
Yeah.
As they say on their website, when you're mountain biking, a lot of times you go from very sunny to extremely dark fast. And I've actually bought them for single track sticks, so that was like that. But it was just like, it's amazing how quickly and how dark it can go. Mm-hmm. So having that can help you see these things on the road. The trail ones I don't like because they make you look weird because they can still see your eyes. But who cares if you're not crashing?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think that, once again, like the concept of looking forward always applies, and doing that scan, that you're doing from where you are to up ahead. But when it gets into that splotchy stuff, which in Michigan that could very well happen, there's so much tree growth in that region.
For sure.
It could happen. In those situations, I always, it's not that I'm carrying a bunch of excess tension in my body, because that usually doesn't that's going to make you less stable.
Well, that kind of ties into another point I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Is that you have to make your return both from a physiological process or a physiological standpoint and a psychological one, a gradual one. You can't rush that sort of thing, unfortunately. And I think the psychological is the one people tend to rush because they think, I just need to get over it. The fact is, you have to reestablish your confidence, and that doesn't necessarily happen as quickly as you'd like it to.
Yeah.
It can be a really slow return for some people, especially as Nate said, the circumstances of the crash were out of your control, something you couldn't possibly predict. That's so hard to come back from. But you can, and it just understand that it is a gradual process, and that confidence will return over time.
The thing that I would say about bike handling, if you don't know what's directly in front of you because of light conditions or anything else, maybe tight bends, is just being in a position in which you are prioritizing proper technique rather than relaxed and just, kind of being slothful with your technique. So what it means when you're descending is that chances are you're in the drops because you have a little bit better handle on your bars, right? You'll not just be in the drops, but then you'll also be in a situation where your chest is a little lower to those bars, not upright. That just means you're going to have more weight on that front wheel. It's going to be more confidence inspiring. And then as well, not just completely relaxing your lower body, but carrying sufficient tension to be able to be pedaling through if you needed to, that sort of thing. Because then what that allows you to do is that allows you to be able to pick up and move and make quick movements. And I think that I noticed that that's something that subconsciously I do, but I know a lot of people may not do that. Whenever I get into situations like that, I just think of Northern California in the winter when we go over there and ride, because it seems like it's always wet, and then it's always these really rough, bad California mountain roads. It's not that I'm on edge, but I'm just making sure I'm doubling down on doing things right to make sure.
From
that
a technique perspective, I think those are all really useful bits of information. But you also have to consider that if you do rush that return process and you can't achieve a relaxed state, then you're setting yourself up for another bad
We're not there yet.
Yeah,
we'll get
jumping ahead.
I have more stuff to talk about for equipment too before we get to like the brain part of it.
Yep.
One thing too for maximum safety is, and it depends really where you're riding. If it's in the, especially when it goes from light to dark and there's potholes, how many times do you like want to, how fast am I going? You want to look down at your Garmin, but that's just like enough time for you to go like 20 feet.
You can look later.
Exactly. There's other descents. I'm thinking like there's some here that are perfectly smooth and there's no potholes coming and you can see and it's a bright day. That's fine. But don't do that. Another thing I would, if I was in this situation, this happened to me, I would buy a wide rim, internal rim tire or wheel, and probably run like 28s. Yeah. And probably run something that's tubeless and a little bit like Meteor. I wouldn't be doing the Vittoria Corsa Speed G Plus, whatever I had. I had those slice out, and it went from perfectly like awesome to nothing. In
no control.
It was like an explosion happened.
Ugh, it's
where you want, if this happens to you, you want it to go psst, and it comes out, and it comes down slowly.
Yeah.
Jonathan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that maybe even you were commenting on that when you switched to 28s for a while on your bike, how incredible the control went up, right? Like it's just a huge difference.
Or even 32s. Like some of the new road bikes do 32s. Yeah. It just makes it's more comfortable. Yeah. You get lower rolling resistance sometimes. It's like a little bit heavier, but if it makes you like not crash at 40. Yeah. Because wider tires, I mean.
Yeah, you have more volume, so you have more compliance, right? Yeah. Like it's that simple. I think it's a good idea.
But sometimes you're just going to hit that piece of metal that's going to slice any tire.
Totally. And if you can, running sealant in that tire can be really helpful. I've heard people running sealant in tubes, and that rarely actually works. And the reason for that is usually because the tube and the tire has like a very, it's got a lot of tension between it, and if that tries to seal, the tension between the tube and the tire really defines how that tube sits in there, much more so than allowing just the tube itself to be sealed. So
my last thought are one of those road or gravel bikes with a little bit of suspension in the front, because that would reduce the amount of banging on the front wheel. By having that,
like the Roubaix with the Future Shock,
or
the Trek has the Domani with
decoupler
up front.
Yep, or even like the gravel bike from the Verge has it too. It's the same as the Roubaix, but all of that I think would reduce the impact on your front wheel when you're hitting a big pothole. Yeah. The biggest thing is not to hit a pothole.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, I am done. I'm ready for.
If I can actually just say one thing.
Go ahead. I don't know where to go from here.
To add on to what Chad was saying is, it doesn't matter what technique or equipment you have. If you haven't gotten into a spot where you can actually mentally relax, or I should say, be okay with the situation and be calm, then you're okay. And I see a lot of people saying you just need to get back on. And in some cases, don't get me wrong, perhaps you need that. But I had a crash at the Giro de San Francisco, which is a notoriously aggressive criterium that happens on very marginal surface in San Francisco. And it was a situation where I was moving up on the outside of the group, giving myself plenty of room, and one rider did the dramatic, I'm done, I'm going to pull off, didn't look, and just completely cut across my wheel. I mean, it was like a 5-foot lateral move, right? Nothing I could have done in that situation, just happened, right? I mean, I could ride 10 feet away, but that's not reasonable. So I crashed and I hit the ground, extremely angry at that moment. And I got up. I have no clue how much of that was fueled by that, but I got up and I jumped straight back into the race. And I did that race. And when I went back into my next group ride a week later, after I recovered from a lot of the injuries, I was not comfortable. So I know that a lot of people will tell you that, if you just get back up and get right back to it, you'll be fine. But if you don't feel fine, don't worry about that. That's normal. It's not like there's something wrong with you because you just jump straight back in and then you don't feel perfectly normal again. That's in my case, it was something where I analyzed it and I thought this was something that was fully out of my control. So that still had me nervous and I was hesitant. So I had to take time and gradually work my way back into it and be patient with myself and not get into situations where I was going to be riding in really tricky terrain with a fast-moving group or something like that. Instead it was just easy.
The nature of the crash too. Excuse me. I've had crashes during criteriums where someone did that, chopped me or pushed me into a curb or something, and I fell and it hurt, but it was also, I think I've spoken about this before, it was rather liberating. It's like, oh, I crashed. It wasn't that bad. I'm still able to ride my bike. I'm a little skinned up, but I still feel good. I've still got fitness. I'm a little less scared of crashing now for whatever reason. The adrenaline's pumping. I don't know. But it was a bit liberating, and the race actually went really well from that point forward. But that was a minor crash.
Yeah,
that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about damage. This isn't something you're going to hop back on your bike and just all's going to be well suddenly because psychologically you're forcing yourself to immediately get over it. That's not how it works.
I think that's a great point. Like her crash, my crash where I had to get surgery on my collarbone, your concussion where you didn't know where you were.
Yeah.
Like those aren't the hop back on, but they are little ones. It happens in mountain biking and in cross.
Totally.
Little crash and cross. Man, I don't even think about it at all, right? It hurts a ton the next day, but I just get back on and go. But you're right, it's just little skin stuff. You're like, that wasn't so bad. I mean, it does hurt, but it's a different level.
And I guess that, and I think the main point for me, for somebody with this, is don't feel bad if you don't feel instantly comfortable.
For sure.
It's okay to be uncomfortable.
You get back on the bike too soon and you get out there and you're just full attention, super, super twitchy and nervous and watching everybody and just expecting something bad to happen, chances are it's going to happen. You need to be able to return at a rate that allows you to stay reasonably relaxed.
Yes.
I mean, it's not going to be a fun process. It's probably going to be really tough initially, but over time, time heals in so many ways. So just give yourself the time and gradually ease back into it.
Yeah, that's the good point, is make it gradual and let your body and mind take the time they need rather than you trying to force it.
So when I broke my collarbone a year and a half ago, that was during a road race in a gravel section, and I was in a pace line of, I think it was third wheel. The first person or fourth wheel, dodged a pothole the very last second. I was third wheel. The next person flipped over, and then I hit them and flipped over, and someone hit me. So you think third wheel, it's probably a good spot to be in, right?
Poop happens, as you
exactly,
said, right?
But how I got back to it is first, so I was afraid to trust people, right, in a race. 1, 2, I didn't want to do anything with gravel, with fast gravel stuff because of potholes flipping out. So I did mountain bike racing. And I would actually do gravel racing, but then I wouldn't be on people's wheels on those fast sections.
Right.
I'd be all by myself.
Yeah.
And then when I actually got back to racing crits, where it's more trusting people, I was actually more scared of it before until I actually got into it. When I actually got into it, I think the first one was when we did the 4 or 5 and stuff.
Yeah.
I had no fear in that. And maybe part of it because I was riding with you. Maybe that's part of it too, is riding with other people.
Yeah.
I rode with the Clif Bar guys, no fear at all. Mark Pro, no fear.
You can cultivate
people
skills
you trust with,
help you deal with the situations that just spring themselves upon you. So so now that you got a little bit of mountain biking under your belt and you can hop things a little more quickly, respond a little more quickly.
I can't.
But most athletes do it a bit and they know they can do it.
Yeah.
So when that pothole appears in front of them, all of a sudden they're more likely to be able to actually hop it and leave the poor bastard behind them to deal with the pothole.
I have another equipment thing.
Yeah.
And this actually happened. This is why I think Pete beat me in the Merck style TT a long time ago.
The only reason.
We talked. Well, really, the time was so close. It probably was the only reason.
Yeah. It was close.
Going down if my vision gets my speed starts to overtake my vision. This happens with like headlights or like lights at night.
Yeah. That
I use my disc brakes, and I say disc brakes because of rim brakes. I popped an inner tube by heating up so much.
Yeah.
But on this one, it was a high head position to look forward. The wind was coming into my sunglasses, and they were tearing up my eyes where I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Ooh, okay, I'm going to slow down here." You know what I mean? Where you overtake what your vision is.
Yeah.
And then I think disc brakes are a great way because you can just use them the whole time and not worry about any mechanical issue.
Yeah.
And just slow down, like.
Yeah, who
cares?
You have to weigh that, right? Like, is it worth the sacrificing the safety?
I think it is, and then you get better and better about looking ahead, and it's a gradual process where you get back up to it, where you can descend at 40, 50, 60 miles per hour without touching them. Yep. But right away when you come back, 30 feels super fast.
I go through that every year, whether I crash or not. Starting the season and learning to descend again. I mean, it's a quick curve. It doesn't take me long to get back up to those speeds, but they're not comfortable initially.
Yeah, you have to work your way into it for sure.
I'm glad I feel like honesty here because a lot of people are like,
yeah, totally. Oh, I just
descending, just like, just let it go, man.
On that horse.
Send it, man. Just do that.
Yeah. Let's go on to Josh's question. He says, "Hey guys, just wanted to say thanks. After a 4-year hiatus from endurance sports, I'm on a quest to get fast again. I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 months, and I love it, and I appreciate what you do."
Thank you, Josh.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Josh.
He says, "As a former fast guy, I didn't think I'd learn much, but your expertise is awesome, and I love your humility."
Really loaded with that.
Awesome. He says, "I hope to ride with y'all someday. Since I started listening, I'm up 3.3 watts per kilogram to 4.2, and have had goals to get back over to 5, and lots of the progress has been made with info from you guys." Nice, man. Way to go. "I have a question about sprint power. I was a Cat 1 crit racer with a decent kick. My main focus now is triathlon, and I don't do any sprint training at all. If I throw down for an odd town line sign or in a very small local race, my 5-second power is still surprisingly high. It's over 1,450 watts and a max power of around 1,650. So he says, does that ever go away?"
Let's put this in context. That's legit.
That's
really good.
Power,
that's like Pro Tour level capacity or capability. How long you can hold it.
Unless Josh...
That's untrained.
Unless Josh is like 350 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. But probably not if he's at 4.2 and going to go back up to 5.
I highly doubt it. Yeah, exactly.
That's why he's a Cat 1, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
He says, I'm just going to lay out a bit more information, Chad, from here, and then we'll jump into it. He says, I assumed it would be gone, referring to his sprint power, as it's a higher level of fitness and not one of the fundamentals is endurance, force, efficiency, that sort of thing. I asked because I want to keep my training triathlon focused, and he says Xterra and 70.3s, for a few years, and he says my main focuses are muscular endurance and FTP, but when I hit master's age in 2 years and still have that kick, I might have a go at Masters Nationals up here in Canada for the crit road race and TT. So he says, what have you seen and what are your thoughts? Will I lose that kick? And if so, how much and when?
It is a higher level of fitness for some athletes and not for others. For some athletes, it has to be cultivated, making it a higher level of fitness. They have to chase it. They have to do it at a very specific time, very specific types of workouts, and it's only going to last for so long. With someone like you, however, it sounds like this is part of your physiology. So my guess is you have in the work, maybe in general, but especially in the muscles that drive the pedals, you have a high composition or a high fiber type composition or predisposition to fast twitch. You're able to cultivate that, and that's going to be there, excuse me, probably forever. To some extent, you can over time reshape your fiber type distribution, but I'm talking time to take those sprinting fibers and downgrade them to something that's a little more oxidative, a little more aerobic, can take years. I mean, years of consistent endurance training.
Yeah. And
then to actually take those sprint fibers and bring them all the way down to slow twitch fibers, the really high or low fatigue or high fatigue fibers, to put that right? The highly low fatigable
endurance fibers.
Endurance fibers. That can literally take a decade or more. I mean, this is a long transition. This isn't something that's going to happen in a couple seasons of dedicated training. So if you are trying to shift the way your body is currently built, you're in for quite a long process. So just expect to have that. Exploit it. It sounds like you're doing pretty well from the aerobic side of things, so I don't know that I would give it too much thought. But to answer your question, it's probably going to be there for a very long time.
Do you think he should, every 3-4 weeks, do some sprints to to maintain
it. If he wants to employ it, yeah.
Well, if he wants it in 2 years, I mean, I know he says you're not going to lose it, but
I mean, really, with stuff like 5 to 10 second sprints, you can intersperse those wherever. And it's not really going to detract from any aspect of your endurance capabilities. So why not? Mm-hmm. And especially if there's any chance, and it's not bad having that power too, to be able to use it in scenarios, even in a triathlon.
Xterra.
Yeah.
There'll be little sections where you're going to have to push up a hill.
For sure.
Totally, yeah. The mountain biking terrain
pass somebody
that upon you. Yeah, passing. Yeah, it's a good point too.
Yeah. Start or not? Well, not really start because you swim.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
This reminds me of the people. Sorry, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
In middle school, I used to play a lot of basketball, or maybe high school, and I could never jump. But there'd always be that kid who would just like pick a basketball and just dunk. And you're like, well, how does that happen? Yeah. And they're maybe 6 feet tall, right? They're not incredibly.
Not like you.
Not
6'6".
Yes, not like me. But it's just like the natural ability. And I tried so long to try to be able to jump, and I do hang cleans and all these explosive movements, and I eventually got it where I could dunk, but never in a game.
Yeah, with very specific and consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's
just not natural.
It's not just in your physiology.
And guarantee you now, like touching the rim would probably be hard.
Yeah.
And I'd probably pull something trying to jump up and touch the rim.
So I could see some people listening to this just thinking like, that's it. That's why I've never been a sprinter. It's because I'm not made to be a sprinter.
No, that's not the takeaway we want to impart, for sure.
You can train it.
You can. And you might not ever be the best sprinter. You might be so predisposed to being an endurance type athlete, really heavy on the slow twitch side of things, that you're only going to get to be so good of a sprinter. But that's one of those things that, maybe you pursue it with training for a while and you recognize, man, it's a lot of work for me to cultivate even a decent sprint. Why would I possibly fold more of my effort into something that's never really going to pay off that well?
Yeah, 1450 for 5 seconds. You guys ever touch that?
No.
No.
I think my max power for 5 seconds is under 1,000 for sure.
I think my max power for 1 second is like 1230.
Yeah.
And I have, but that's because I have some of that. And it wasn't because I trained it. It's because it's there.
What's your max 5 second?
Max 5 second is right about that. I think it's like 1400.
Yeah. Chad's a beast.
And max power is 18.
18.
Nice. I want to hit home on something here. Is in our minds, I find that so many times we simplify it down to the fact that he has higher peak power than I did, and that's why I lost that sprint. But there are so many more things, and very rarely I would say that it's your peak power or even your 5 second power when you're coming down to a sprint. If it's dramatically different, sure. But there are so many things you could have done.
The only time you can make those apples comparisons are when it's a perfect drag race. When you both have the same scenario leading into that perfect drag race too.
Yeah, which pretty much never happens in a normal race scenario, right?
Yep.
So there's so many other things that you can do, and I find a lot of people, and it's fun. It's fun. Like we just made a big deal out of Chad's sprint power. Like it's a fun thing to like.
It's so fun.
Your peak power is definitely something you want to keep an eye on. It's for fun.
Fun
right?
measuring stick. Yeah, I mean it means very little in the case of a lot of the types of sport or events we compete in.
Yep. Yeah, and I couldn't. I'll just leave it at that.
I want to say there's like
it perfectly. So.
This is just off the top of my head, but there's maybe a 15 to 20% you can make up by being smart. And then you can also lose 15-20% by being dumb.
It's hard to quantify, but it's substantial.
Yeah, something like that. So maybe I could beat Chad with a 1100 watt 5 second if Chad was very dumb and I was very smart.
And see, we know that you have big 1 minute power too. So you blow me up using that minute, and then your sprint only has to be 800 watts because I'm dying back there trying to muster 500.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hopefully. We'll see.
I don't want to put ideas in my head.
This one also kind of folds into this. We're talking about, big, strong legs. As Jean-Christophe says, hi, guys, love the podcast, and I've gained a lot of insight from it, which has led to real results on the road and hanging on with to the ex-pro chain gang around town. Nice job, man. Way to go. Says, I used to be a downhill mountain biker, and the years of super hard short efforts have left me with massive, massive legs. I want to just cover something on this, like a cool story on the Clif Bar guys again. Miles Lamont is one of the racers for Team Clif Bar, and he's an absolute hitter, like a strong dude. And he has been known for riding his downhill mountain bike and passing roadies up a grade in San Luis Obispo, actually. Like, he's just gigantic legs, big, strong dude. These downhill guys build a huge amount of, like, short and explosive power. So if people are wondering, like, downhill guy, he can just coast down the hill. Well, they're also extremely fast. So very good athletes. So he says, they're great for sprinting and TTing, referring to his massive legs, he says, and focused training and substantial weight loss has gotten me some nice climbing chops. He says, there's not much fat left to lose on me, and a big part of my weight is my legs. Over the years, we've seen high-profile pros lose lots of leg bulk while clearly keeping power up and morphing from TT specialists to climbers and GC prospects. Dumoulin is a recent example. He says, how is that done? I imagine some level of catabolism will have to happen, but how do you keep the power levels up and get your body to trim down the leg muscles you're using constantly? I prefer a solution which doesn't involve getting cancer and chemo, as in the most dramatic example of this. Thanks in advance. Keep up the good work. I love you, Nate. Ooh. He says, I'll be expecting a free account voucher in my email. Nice. Nice try.
Can sum this up in one word: time.
Yeah.
That's it. It's going to take time. If you want to do it without sacrificing power, then you're dedicating yourself to a pretty long time course.
Yeah.
To shave muscle, to ditch functional mass is, and I think it's harder than losing fat. I mean, fat, you just cut the calories a bit, but if you want to lose muscle mass, you have to chase it pretty specifically, and you have to be willing to take a performance hit in the process.
That you are lucky, because I am the complete opposite. I like muscle mass goes away, fat stays.
It probably is pretty subjective. I hadn't really considered it, but it probably is. Yeah.
I think unless Jean-Christophe, is how you say it? Probably.
Yeah.
You are like shaving the marginal gains here. I mean, weight on your legs, like, dude, if you're at 5.5, 5.7, 6 watts per kilo, then go for that. But if you're like at 2 watts per kilo right now, that is not, or 2 to 3 or 4, like you're going to be aerobic fitness. Like, don't worry about the weight on your legs. I think
when you pushed into the realm of 5+, you can start worrying about things like this.
Yep, exactly. Like, I said 5.5, but 5. Okay, we'll say 5+.
5 is.
Yeah,
a good spot to start really worrying about the marginal gains in the marginal body composition gains.
I think that a lot of us as amateur cyclists hear about the marginal gains because those are always so interesting to us that somebody would do such a seemingly small thing and put so much devotion into that in order to gain an advantage. So we think I should do that too. So but if you could step back really quick, you're basically like trying to climb up a super tall tree to grab some fruit when there's low-hanging fruit all around.
It's like you're at 2 or 3 or 4 watts per kilo and you get an altitude tent. It's
You can't put marginal gains ahead of basics. I mean, that's putting the cart before the horse. There are a lot of easier things to exploit before you start worrying about that stuff.
Yeah, the altitude tent too is I would do that way before losing muscle mass. In my mind, it would be body composition of low fat, and you might think you have low fat, go get a DEXA, and then figure out where you actually are compared to the pros. Then it would be upper body mass. And then only if I'm like, especially wanted to be a real climber, would I do try to lose leg mass.
Now, assuming that Jean-Christophe is 5+, and assuming that he has trimmed all these other things, like you said, Chad, it really comes down to catabolism, right?
Yeah,
breaking
exactly.
that down.
Your muscle or your body will use muscle in the absence of and in addition to other fuel stores. So you can have carbohydrate on board, you can have fat on board, you can be working at intensities that utilize both those fuel sources, but your body is still going to utilize some muscle mass. How much depends on a number of things: how intense the training is, how long term it is. I mean, you want to ditch some muscle mass, eat very little, and go out and do a 5-hour ride. You will sacrifice some muscle, I promise. That's basically what Wiggins did in his run-up to the 2012 Tour. He did long, depleted rides, very little nutrition over the course of them, and in the process, his body catabolized some functional lean muscle mass.
It's not a pleasant thing to endure.
And it doesn't.
You've done that.
And it hampers, I have, and it's not fun at all, and it hampers performance. So, if you're going to do this in the off-season and you're willing to take or risk the potential threats to your general good health, and that's one way to do it, but it's obviously not a healthy thing. If you do it, the more gradually you do it, the closer to healthy you can make it. But if you're going to try to rush it, you're going to pay a hefty toll, I promise.
Yeah, I can. I've done long rides like that for regularly, a lot of them for a long period of time, and gone through that whole process, and it. I was able to effectively manage it within reason for a short amount of time. And basically I was just dropping weight and I was trying to maintain power, but it all came crashing down at one point. And the one thing I can say is before that, or I should say during that process, life was pretty miserable. I just felt completely flat.
Well, if you want to put it in the simplest, not simple terms, but hormonally or endocrinologically speaking, you want high levels of cortisol. And you get those through, like I said, high intensity training bumps it up high. Long-term training does it as well. But cortisol is notorious for metabolizing muscle mass. So just look at it from the perspective of maintaining a high level of cortisol, which, all this aside is kind of a tough way to live and not a healthy one either. I mean, it's basically chronic stress nudges our cortisol levels up, and we deal with that over the long term, and it doesn't have positive effects on really any aspects of our lives. So again, you can do this, but the longer and more slower you can make this process, the better.
This is I'm still like stuck on not even people shouldn't ever think of this.
Trying to ditch muscle.
Well, yeah, and no, just this type of like refinement.
Yeah.
Let's say, and maybe 5 watts per kilo is the wrong measurement. Maybe it's the close to your genetic potential is the better way to say it, but that's really hard to figure out.
Yeah.
But I think of Peter Sagan. He's got giant legs, right?
Oh yeah,
huge.
And I guarantee you, John, Christoph, he's faster than you, right? Like,
look at any of the big sprinters who make them over the minor coals. I mean, if they can get to the finish line, and they're packing a ton of muscle mass, but they are aerobically or metabolically very, very fit.
I'm not even going to call him
You can make that muscle mass functional in terms of endurance sport.
I'm calling Sagan just a great road racer, and he's a good climber. Like, so like this would be something where Peter's like, okay, I've done it all in sprinting. Now, over 4 or 5 years, I want to be a GC guy.
Yeah.
That is when like what we're talking about comes into play. But that's so, unless Peter's listening, that's so not you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's just, don't
it's
even
a narrow
think
class
about
of
that.
riders, first off, and like you just said, 4 or 5 years for someone at that level too. I mean,
think about adding an extra half an hour of training, like an extra interval to during the week, if you want to be a better climber. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's so many things like that. There's improving your nutrition and your sleep.
Fruit, I'm sure.
One thing that
this riles me up.
Yeah, I can tell. One thing that I always think of when I get tempted to do this is I actually Google a picture of Bradley Wiggins' skinny Roubaix. And there's this picture that you'll see of him sitting at the side of the road. I have it up on my screen. You guys can click on it too. But
he's a walking skeleton.
It looks like, he looks like an internment camp victim. It's pretty terrifying. And I look at that and I think I don't want to be like that. So, not that I risk getting to that point, but sometimes I forget about how unpleasant it is to be able to do that. And this really is.
If you go over the time course of his transformation, that's like a 10-year deal.
Oh, yeah. You look at that. I mean, if you look at Wiggins from 2000 until 2012, 2012 being the peak of his career, winning the Tour de France and also winning
the peak
Olympic
of that
gold.
end of his career.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been successful all across it.
Yep. He has been winning at track and road and going back and forth between track and road from 2000 all the way until 2012. But and even thereafter, of course, as well. But you'll see, if you look at those years, you can see a pretty dramatic roller coaster of his body composition and what it looks like. Where he was in the track and he was bulked up, and then for road, it's interesting. It's not 1 year to the next. You see that it takes a few years for him to get back to road. That freakishly skinny, form that he has. And then when he goes back to track next year, 1 year, and he's back to, what it was. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah. My advice to Jean-Christophe would be to capitalize on what you're already good at. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to be a better climber, you can gradually work toward that. I wouldn't approach it from a body composition perspective so much as a training one. Mm-hmm. Less on the nutrition side. I'd probably keep on doing things much the way you're doing them, just emphasizing your training emphasis more on climbs than sprints or whatever else.
Sustained power.
Sustained.
It's not climb.
I like it.
Well, I want to say two more things because I don't want people to misunderstand me. One, I think body composition changes are very much something people should do, and getting your fat to a certain level. Mm-hmm. If you want to be the Wiggins, Froome 4% DEXA.
Yeah,
like that's where it gets to the marginal gains. But if you're at 15 and you want to get to 10, that's well in line.
Can have huge impacts, and you can do it very healthily.
Yes. And the other aspect is the upper body mass of maybe you've been lifting a lot of weights. Stop lifting weights because you want to do well at mountain bike nationals or climbing thing.
Yeah.
That I'm totally on board with.
Yeah.
But the trying to like everything else is perfect and you want to try losing leg muscle because they're just too big. I would like to know Jean-Christophe's DEXA. Because I bet you there's
more fat on board than he knows.
As we know,
it's
when
impressive.
when you look,
it's a hard truth to come up against.
Exactly. Like you think oh, I have a little bit of six pack. There's not much left. Oh, there's lots.
That's
there's
amazing.
like 8 more pounds you could lose
to
to be like a pro level.
To be at that level.
Yeah. Before you try to lose 2 pounds on your legs, which would be a lot.
Yeah.
And then the part I'm so against about losing muscle on the legs is it will probably reduce your power. So it's like this scale.
Seesawing.
Yeah, that you have to just manage it just right.
Yeah, it's very tricky. Very tricky to do. Chad, thanks for submitting your question, Chad. Very kind of you to go through the proper channels. He says, hello, fan of the podcast. You're a fan too. Good to know. He says, you guys talk a lot about nutrition timing for performance and recovery. I especially enjoyed the discussion on insulin and timing carbs in episode 167. Good to hear it, Chad. He says, I have a question related to that discussion. I do my workouts in the evening. I'm sure many trainer road users complete workouts in the evening. Can you give some suggestions on nutrition for cyclists doing hard workouts in the evening? For example, a 90-minute ride with 45 minutes in the sweet spot range, about 100 training stress points, and that's about 1,300 kilojoules. He says, I usually finish my rides just about 1 hour before bedtime. So, should I try to replace all the glycogen and calories and carbs before bed? Or, he says, I'm guessing not, but thinking about quality of downstream workouts, some fueling needs to be done, right? Mm-hmm. So, our thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, Chad, it depends on what your goals are. What are you chasing right now? Are you looking for fat loss? Are you looking for performance improvement? You're looking for a little bit of each? We can approach it from any of those scenarios. Mm-hmm. But in terms of doing something so depleting that close to bed, all the sleep disruption potential aside, you're depleting glycogen stores. How you replete those is going to be largely influenced based on what's next. Do you have to do a hard morning workout? Pretty unlikely. Do you have to do another workout the next night? More likely. You probably got 24 hours to refuel. So how and when you go about it isn't all that big of a concern. Dosing your system with a large influx of carbohydrate just before going to bed could create some certain sleep issues. It's not necessary, again, unless you're doing something in the morning, which is pretty unlikely. But you've depleted something that my concern would be after doing something hard like that and taxing your muscles is that you get a bit of protein in the system just to facilitate protein synthesis so that you're not costing yourself any muscle. I mean, we do exercise, we do workouts so that we can improve our muscles capacity, not diminish it, which if you deprive it of that protein in particular is exactly what will happen.
When you say not likely, I'm going to say not recommended.
Yeah.
Right? If you did this and you wake up at 6 in the morning, you did a hard workout and then you fail your next workout, occasionally I get people who are like, oh, your ramp test is wrong. And I'm like, well, you did this 2 hour sweet spot the night before. You woke up at 6 a.m. and tried to do a VO2 max or to VO2 max workout or a threshold workout.
I don't know why you would ever stack workouts like that. Night of or night before and then morning of. So.
I think it's the time thing people do it.
Yeah, people say I don't have time to work out in the evening, the next evening, so I got to squeak it in before work.
So if you are going to do it aerobically.
Yeah.
Or less, like very easy.
Yeah.
If you need to do it, because you just set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I've never found, after doing a late workout in the evening, I've never found great performance the next morning.
Yeah, neither have I. And there's nothing to say you can't replenish some of those carbohydrates. I mean, you don't have to
do 1,300 calories.
Carbo load that night. Yeah, I mean, just go ahead and eat a regular meal. Yeah. If you're not concerned with fat loss and you don't care what your macronutrient content is, how much you're getting from carbohydrate, fat, and protein, just eat a regular meal and go to bed.
Yeah.
But if you're chasing fat loss, if that's the big concern, just try to skip the carbohydrate. Replenish with protein, largely protein and hydrate, and probably keep the fat low too. Definitely keep the fat low too.
This is the sleep low. Yeah. Sleep low as in sleep low on glycogen.
Yeah, and then to further that, get up in the morning and do a low intensity workout in that still depleted state before you have your breakfast, and then that, with the intent of furthering fat loss, is a good way to go.
So right now I am trying to lose some fat, and my body composition has gone in the wrong way recently, and I'm trying to do three things.
Disneyland.
Trying to lift weights, lose fat, and increase my FTP.
That all sounds fantastic.
I'm finding it extremely hard to do so far.
Yeah.
And just with Baxter, which I do a ton, which is a 90-minute aerobic workout.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a good, in Inception when they spin that little, that thing, the top, to know that, where they're at.
Yeah,
that's what Baxter is to me. Yeah. By the way, Baxter happens, I know it's kind of I know how my body's feeling and how I respond to it.
Yeah.
I ate nothing during the day. Tried doing Baxter, which is aerobic, should be easy. I stopped twice for 5-10 minutes. This is horrible. I ate a whole bunch of fruit. I took a gel. It takes 15 minutes for that to get in my system, and then I felt better to finish it.
Yeah.
But the timing, this is a bigger question than what just Chad said, but the the timing of it for me, I'm sensitive. I'm very carb dependent, and I'm fine with that because guess what? There's carbs everywhere.
That's the system you've cultivated, and that's how you race. So it works. Yeah.
So yesterday I tried doing this. I told you guys I was going to say, okay, I'm still going to try to eat less during the day, eat less of everything, therefore less carbs too. But then right before the race, I was going to or before the ride, I was going to have cinnamon toast Ezekiel with honey on it to try to like get like fuel right for it. And I did Taylor striped. It was 150% FTP, 15 seconds on, 50 seconds off, 16 in a row. Do that 6 times.
Cool.
I know, it was evil. Yeah. I almost got through one of them. Like I got through the warm-up of one, and then the next one I backpedaled. But that wasn't enough. So I'm just saying like the
takes a lot.
Trying to lose some body fat at the same time as doing high performance stuff is extremely hard.
Yeah, you need glycogen for something like that. I'm talking on board in the muscle, available sugar. You can't just ingest it and expect a workout like that to go well.
So this was like 3 hours ahead. I ate 3 hours ahead of this ride. So next time I do it, I'm going to try to have a bigger lunch. Like I had a sweet potato with beans and a salad for lunch. So now I'm going to try to add maybe a bagel or a bowl of brown rice or something on top of that.
Preload those stores a bit. It'll be an entirely different experience.
I'm hoping so. Yeah. But it's just I think that people, this is like when I talked before about the people don't realize they might be getting sick and they have bad performance. I think it's much more common where they don't realize their nutrition ties into how they perform with training.
Yeah, super common. Reese's question.
Do you agree?
I do. And it's a sad thing to come to terms with. I find it stupefies me that people can't associate nutrition with performance. It
took me a long time. I didn't realize I just thought I needed to eat enough. You know what I mean? Like
enough for just to carry like a normal level for all sort of normal human performance. But you're asking your body to do exceptional things, so you need to fuel exceptionally. Yeah. Reese says, "Hey guys, I'm a triathlete and just finished my second full season in the sport and enjoying my off season down in Australia. I'm eyeing my next season with my main A race in May of 2019 and a few training races leading into that race. Good to hear, man, and good luck." He says, "My question is about training camps. I have a couple of extra weeks leave every year from work. Then my wife, and he says, my wife and I have started toying with the idea of doing a couple training camps throughout the year. These small camps could be anywhere from 3 to 7 days long and done either at home or away. When is the ideal time in a season or year to attack training camps?" He says, alternatively, I'm thinking of buying a gravel or XC bike and using some of the time to explore a new side of cycling and work on my terrible triathlete level bike handling skills.
Do both.
Love the app and podcast.
Yeah. So let's talk more generally just about training camps for a little bit.
Yeah,
and we can talk about how to time his particular type of training camp.
Cool.
A lot of different types of training camps. And what you're describing is an accumulation camp, which is actually something we have on our near horizon. So we'll talk about that in a little bit too. You can do an altitude camp, heat acclimation camp. They all have different time courses and they have to be staged differently in terms of when your competition is, when you want to derive the benefit or realize the benefit of them. And then there's just like the team camp training camps, which I basically just call pissing contests because that's what they devolve into every time. Doesn't matter what the goals are from the onset or from the outset. People go into them and they get roped into situations that are probably actually detrimental to their training. People just beat up on each other. We just want to show everyone how strong we are and how
it's like a stage race. What it becomes.
It does
with drinking in between the stages.
Proper recovery.
Chad's in on that.
Yeah, sort of. I paid that price too. It's kind of miserable. But you're I'm guessing looking to improve fitness just in the short term. Like you want to improve fitness and then you want to do an event. As opposed to another type of camp would be improve fitness and then basically set the base a little or raise the base. So you want to maybe drive your training stress up, your 6 week average, and then you want to go from there.
Yep.
That's a whole other thing. So that's like an incremental where you maybe schedule 3 of these over the course of the season, and this too could be what you're describing. So you're going to do something that basically lifts the playing field, and then you're going to train normally for a while, then you're going to do another camp that lifts it a little more, then you're going to train normally for a while. And this brings me to a very crucial point when it comes to camps is the day-to-day matters more. So you can do these camps and you can elevate fitness and you can focus on one particular thing, but what matters is what happens after the camp. I mean, the camp is the bump in fitness, but the bump in fitness and then how you ride that wave, to mix analogies here, is what actually matters more. So, and then what comes after that camp in addition to recovery too? Because I mean, not only is your body knocked down, but you're taking a departure from life and then you're going to return to life. So what are all the things that you neglected over the course of your camp that you have to get back to that are going to stand in the way of adequate recovery? So there's a lot of considerations here.
Yeah. With camps, I can't help but think that, and this is what I always think of, I don't want to dose my body with stress that I can't then, absorb and recover from. Right?
Well, yeah, and over the course of the camp, you kind of have to be cognizant of the fact that, you have to concern yourself with the fact that your body can adapt at a certain rate. Just because you have time to do a camp and you want to heap on the stress, it doesn't mean you're going to benefit from it day after day after day. So over the course of the camp, I expect to deal with a high level of fatigue. And expect to eat more, hopefully relax more because the camp has removed you from all those other responsibilities that could interfere. But your body can still only do what it can do. So if you come into it with a high level, if you're a Grand Tour rider, you can do these crazy big camps and actually benefit from them. But if you're a rider like most of us and you try to do something like that, you're probably going to overall hinder your performance in the weeks to come.
So what about timing?
For something like what I think he's describing, where he's trying to get a bump in fitness and then apply that bump to an upcoming event, probably like 2 to 3 weeks out. It depends to some extent on your rate of recovery, and the severity of the camp itself.
Yeah.
So again, if you can balance those well, and then it takes me about a week and a half to come back from this, then I can do a couple taper workouts, and then I'm primed for that event. Then that's what you do. If I'm going to do a big camp and it's going to take me a couple weeks to bounce back from that, well, then you have to weigh, is the bump in fitness I got gonna wash with the decline in fitness I get from spending the necessary time recovering?
Yeah. It's I think we've said before, like no more than 2 times your 6-week average stress.
Yeah.
So like if you're doing 400, don't go more than 800.
Yeah.
Or else it happens, but then you get into a deep dark hole.
Yeah.
Chad, I think when you did the Giro trip in Italy,
buried me.
Yeah, you going in, you were like 300.
4 times. Yeah.
And then you went to 1200.
No, I went to like 1350 or something.
Yeah.
It was stupid. And it was fun. I tried to keep the intensity low, but the fact is it put me in a hole that took me a long time.
Yeah, even your motivation went down after that.
Yeah.
Like it was
I
kind of a trip of a lifetime, and then it just broke you for a lifetime.
Like the best cycling experience of my life made me want to ride my bike less than anything ever has.
Yeah.
Is that funny how that works
yeah,
out?
exactly.
I think we can speak to the perils of team camps, like specifically, and how Chad was talking about structuring the camp. I think it's really important. You can, if you are going into a camp in which you cannot control the rides or what it's going to happen, really try to look at that and use that rule if you can to try to govern how much volume you should have relative to the amount of training volume that you're currently carrying, because it can bear down, it can ruin your training.
Yeah, I mean you can look at this on paper too. So like what we were just talking about. Say I know that I do in a week about 400 training stress points. That's where I am right now. So I'm going to go into a camp and I'm probably not going to exceed 800. If I do, it's at my own risk, or maybe some information comes to light over the course of the camp that makes me think I can handle a little more. But you forgot where I was going with this.
The main thing that I see, like I look at my graph and I look at like the team camps, and I was like, I'm all good, things are trending, and then you can see team camp and it's like way over the top, and then watch my training suffer.
And then what happens afterward? Yeah.
Watch it suffer. Like
I get sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy to rope yourself into these scenarios because it's fun. I mean, you're removed from all the other things. You think I'm just here to ride my bike, so I'm going to ride my bike a ton, but you still have to be sensible about it.
The other thing I find that no one at a camp is all the same fitness level or can handle the same volume. And usually it's the person who organized the camp is one of the most fit people. Yeah. And they do organize the really long ones. It is nice though when I see people do alternative routes.
Totally.
I did it with the Mark Pro team. I can't ride with the Mark
That's
Pro guys
camp.
for 5 hours.
Yeah.
But they had it where like we went by the house once. And I was like, okay, I'll see you guys later. I'm going to stop at the house.
And that's really all it takes is 2 courses or two different options. You can go with the fast hitters, the guys who are in shape, the guys who are going to do the really brutally tough rides, 10,000 feet of climbing, etc. Or something like that. You do 2 loops instead of a single loop if you want to be in the harder group. But there has to be that option. Otherwise, it's a keep up or die sort of scenario, and that seldom makes for good training.
And the other option too, where there is the person that is not as fit as everyone else, but everyone waits for them.
Yeah.
It's not as fun.
Yeah, that's
like,
the other side.
Don't be that person too. Like just be like, hey, you guys are all faster. It's cool. I've been in there before. Just go.
I think that we have a skewed perspective on what the pro team camps are. I don't think we fully understand them. A lot of the time, and I mean we as an average Joes, I think a lot of the time we assume that everybody rides together, and they don't. They ride together for press, maybe once or twice. Every day, riders go off and do specific things for their specific needs and for the needs of whatever responsibilities
highly structured,
they have.
highly individualized.
Yeah, you'll see that. Like I remember there was a video when Tony Martin was on edX or Quickstep, I guess was the name of it then. But when he was on Quickstep, he was just basically alone the whole entire camp. Like he was not going out and riding with the sprinters. He wasn't going out and riding with the rollers or the climbers or anything else. As a time trial specific guy, he was basically alone for the whole camp.
Yeah, just think of trying to make a camp where the sprinters ride with the time trialists.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Or just, I mean, the same sprinters who are at different levels of fitness at that same time. You know,
depending on what the races are and all that. So,
okay,
with all that,
a lot of considerations.
Bros.
Yeah,
we've talked about this, but so Mauna Kea. That's the climbing from 0 to 14 something thousand feet. Yeah, It's extremely hard. It took you 7 hours.
7, 8, 9
I think you're still in the top 10 on Strava.
Yeah. I don't care if I drift out of that top 10, by the way. That's okay. I'm not eager to go get that.
Original plan was I was going to do it. Chad was going to say he was going to do it, and he was going to bail out halfway. I know it.
Yep.
And I do it by myself. But right now I'm also a little bit heavier than I want to be and a little bit weaker than I want to be. And we were going to have like other industry people. It was going to be an event.
Yeah.
Everyone's bailed out but me. So now I said, well, what if we change this? Instead of doing – the other problem with this is Mauna Kea, we would have to taper into it and then take the time off after it because you can't – like I'm not going to be able to –
It's like I said, Mauna Kea is something you train for. It's not something you use for training.
Yes, because it's roughly an 8-hour effort. And that's a constant effort.
If you're fast.
There's no coasting. If you coast, you fall over. It's really steep. And then on top of that, you're doing that at really high elevation in really extreme weather conditions.
It's just a long day.
Everything about it is extremely severe and damaging to the body. Right?
Elevation.
You're not going to do that and then because of that single day come back a better rider.
No.
I mean, you might gain something.
You'll come back a worse rider.
Yeah,
for real.
So,
absolutely.
Okay, so there's the reasons why.
You're not doing it.
I don't. Well, I guess. Yeah. So what I want to do now is, what if we have Chad organize us a little camp, accumulation camp. That's not too much, not too little, and we will share. We'll tell you where we're going to share it later. Where we invite other people who are going to be there for the race, who want to do these rides, and maybe you're going to do the Ironman, and this is fits into your schedule. Only do it if it does that. Or
because some of these rides aren't going to be insanely big or long.
No, that's the whole point we just talked about. We don't want to do 5-hour rides every day. We're going to die.
There are plenty of folks that are there on the island that are not racing.
Exactly.
A huge amount of them.
They might be there to support their significant other.
Or just watch.
Or just watch, run a bike, and we could all have some fun every morning, start at 7-ish.
Yeah, we've already started to put this together, and we just have the loosest details so far, which basically we're going to do a Monday through Friday sort of thing. Probably actually a Tuesday, Friday. Because
Monday's
we come in travel day, so we're going to have to kind of cobble a ride together then.
Yeah.
But Tuesday through Friday, we know they're going to be early morning. They're probably going to leave from a coffee shop. They're going to involve 2 groups, a group who wants to go at any pace and a group that's going to go slow and steady with me. And I think that's about Jonathan's going to put together the routes. I'm going to structure the routes in a way that makes sense. And
I would like to actually I'd like to all ride together at the slow and steady pace and then have sections where we say, okay, the coffee shop is about 10 minutes away. And it's a hill climb. Go jam it. Exactly.
To the coffee shop. We'll see you there.
So we kind of
and then meet at the top of the hill at the stop.
So that we regroup.
Yep, we will regroup. Yeah. So that's gonna be fun.
It actually could be fun.
Yeah,
could be.
Not like Mauna Kea. No, I'm saying this.
Yeah, Mauna Kea is not going to be. It's never. Was it fun, Jonathan?
No,
there's no aspect.
I got sweet pictures of you though.
You did, man. Yeah. You were a great photographer.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's like the best part of it, I think, because there's the good pictures that you
hanging out with Alex Candelario. was the funnest aspect of that. And
I was
that
with
after I quit and my back was spasming and my legs wouldn't shut off. And
I was with him in that car for literally like 10 hours because of how long it took.
And it was still pleasant.
Oh yeah, it was great. Lots of stories.
Yeah,
it was fun.
If anybody's wondering, that's I think it's Big Island Bike Tours.
Yep.
Alex Candelario, ex-pro cyclist, super great guy.
Really nice guy.
So if you're there, he's the. They have open ups now, or ups maybe. Those bikes that they can fit road wheels on or 27.5 2.0 mountain bike wheels on, and he has spare wheels. So then, like, now if you do Mauna Kea, he has like a fleet of bikes that are perfect for it, so that you could rent that bike and then just like he'll have the wheels ready to swap the wheels.
You can pay Alex to help to support you during the ascent.
Yes.
And there's a spot where there's like lava dust, and you can't ride a road bike through it. So that's where he's talking about. You would switch to a 2.0 wheel, be able to ride through that, then switch back, ride the road bike.
I rode a compromise, but with a 26 tooth chainring. A video of it went viral on Instagram, so I'm sure if you search Mauna Kea, you can find it. But somebody put me in fast forward with a tiny chain ring, and it looked very silly. So, I guess with that, we're basically out of time today. The last thing I want to cover, we'll jump down, gents, to question 12 in this case for us. He says, this one's from Ian. Ian may be our producer, sending in questions as well. So he says, hey guys, love the podcast. You're hitting the perfect blend of serious content and banter. Keep at it. Good to hear. He says, we've not had a kit question for a while, and here's something I'm pondering. Would love to hear your thoughts on the new Venge or the new SL6 disc. So that's the specialized, most recent road bikes that they have. The new Venge is also disc.
Tarmac versus
Venge.
Yeah.
He says, have we reached a point where there are now no real compromises on going full aero, and is this the new future? That's certainly the future in my mind. I think that we're all going to have aero bikes that perform exactly how we want them in terms of handling and weight. Obviously, something that's going down. All three of us have our eye on the new Venge over the new Tarmac, right?
Yeah, so a bit of this is, I'm sure people too with specialized, but it's a little marketing. You got to trust that for me, being data-driven, I'm trusting that the time save for aerodynamic drag they put out, which other people have also like put these bikes in the wind tunnel and have confirmed it, is actually better than the weight savings of the Tarmac. Yeah. And I believe that the Tarmac is only like 2 pounds lighter.
If in the most extreme example, I think if you go with the ultralight S-Works Tarmac,
it's like 2 pounds.
Yeah, I think it's 2 pounds. Otherwise, if you don't get that one, then I think it's a pound.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not too much.
Like that water bottle right there is more than a pound, I bet, with what you have in there.
Yeah.
But then you get all the aero benefits, and like you said, the stiffness is getting there to be the same, so the handling is nice.
Honestly, as vain as I am, the aesthetics are finally getting better too. Because
pretty bike.
Yeah, they're for a long time. I've not preferred the look of aero bikes.
Not really.
And I still have one of my gripes, which is a silly gripe, and it's not performance driven at all, but I feel like if I was riding an aero bike in the past, and I was riding that to just a coffee shop ride or something else, it's kind of like running errands in a Bugatti, right? It's like a little like heavy-handed, like easy guy, like relax. But so it's kind of nice to have a bike that's a little bit more of like a sleeper, aesthetically speaking. But they're getting better in that respect. They're not as like bold and kind of outspoken.
Some of them, the new BMC one is a little bold and outspoken.
It's a little bold. Yeah, that one's a little bold. I don't know. I think I think we're just now getting to the point where the tipping point is getting hit, but we're not quite to the spot where I think it's fully gone across.
We've talked about how you race, and the way that I race, especially if I want to win with crits with 1 minute power. Oh, I want an aero bike, right? Mm-hmm. I want aero everything. Mm-hmm. If I was going to be racing on climbs where I would be winning on 10, 12% grades, and I could be in the pack the rest of the time, I'd be getting the Tarmac. But that to me, that never, ever, 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 ever happens.
Right. Right.
It's 99% of my rides. I'm going to have a bigger benefit of having less aerodynamic drag the entire race than saving a pound on a climb.
Yeah, I think that all three of us are going to have an aero bike for our next bikes.
This one too. The compliance thing is another thing. I had the original Venge, which did not feel good at all. And then I have the new Venge Vias. That one is better. I'm excited to ride this new one to see if it's even better.
The compliance thing is interesting too, because once you get into climbing, you're putting a huge amount of torque into your frame when you're climbing. Like just because it's like it's high torque.
Thank you.
High force.
Yeah, you noticed.
Yeah. Huge amount of torque though, compared to like in a sprint, you put a lot of torque through there too. But don't discount the fact that when you're going slow on a really steep climb, you're putting in some cases maybe even equal torque, right? You may not be full out sprinting, but you're putting in a lot into that frame. So. Stiffness really matters on those steep climbs too. Sure. And in fact, I think a lot of people confuse a light bike with a stiff bike. In other words, like you could give a person that actually a bike that weighs a little bit heavier, but if it's very stiff and they're in a climb,
it feels like it
they
goes.
would view that as a lighter bike.
Yeah,
that's their perception.
Because it feels like it climbs well.
Totally. It responds really quick. All the energy transfers into forward momentum rather than getting lost in flex.
I wish I knew, like, I don't know, like how many watts you lose to the stiffness, or because you can feel it.
Yeah.
But I wish I could kind of say like is it half a watt? Is this 5 watts? Like, because if it was 5 watts, that would blow people's minds, right?
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it's something like the half watt because because bike manufacturers would market it, right?
Yeah.
And they say it's
so.
16% more stiff.
Save this many watts because of the stiffness.
Yeah, 16% more stiff sounds great, but if it's you save a quarter watt, that does not sound great.
Right.
So
exactly.
they say 16% more stiff. So that's what I'm thinking, that it's not. It feels better, but it's not going to really improve your efficiency. I don't know if you're a bike marketer, you should be telling us if it's legit.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because on the mountain bike side of things right now, a lot of brands are designing in like compliance into the rear ends of these bikes. And that seems an interesting choice to me, especially when you have suspension, right? They can.
Is that compliance for hardtails or for shock?
Suspension?
Wow.
Yeah, because they feel that they can get the bike to have better manners. So like, it's a seriously complex thing. Like we think that you just want it to be more stiff, you want it to be lighter, you want it to be more aero, but more across the board isn't necessarily going to deliver a better bike. So I think that now, like finally, the aero bikes are kind of hitting. They're starting to get to the point where they're actually recognizing that they may need to compromise or balance things out rather than just going, full.
I think
force.
they're not compromising. They're just
hopefully
the same like aero improvements, and then they're taking away the compromises they had before.
Yeah.
So they're not compromising the aero side, but then trying to reduce weight and make it more stiff and compliant, which is hard.
Yeah, I think if I got the new Venge, I'd still want a bike that's a little bit more less. How do I say? A little bit more casual.
I mean, I would like to have both and a Roubaix.
Yeah, sure, why not?
The Roubaix being this could be any bike brand, but the Roubaix being the endurance bike, where if we're doing something that's like Levi's Grand Fondo with the bumps. Oh yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, I'm not racing, just enjoy it. Kind of tall head tube.
Comfortable.
Oh, my back feels better already.
Well, thanks everybody for submitting the questions this week. You can do so, remember, at trainerroad.com/podcast, and you can join fellow podcast listeners in the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast Facebook group. You can also join us live every week, Thursday at 8 a.m. If you're curious about what we do here at Trainer Road, you can just find out more about that at trainerroad.com or check out that Trainer Road Beta Testers group on Facebook for things that we're doing down the pipe. And for those of you that are joining us live right now, stay with us and we'll answer your questions that you've submitted. And we'll talk to you all later on the podcast next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. I don't know why I'm looking at the camera because those people are staying, hopefully. Wade asked a question for you, Chad. Last episode, you guys talked about building up to peak TSS during a season and that a 5 to 10% bump in season over season TSS may be achievable. Going more may not. How would you recommend an athlete bridge the gap between the various volume plans? Because they might not be exactly 5 to 10. So we've talked about this before, but if you're going from, let's say, mid-volume a little bit too much, and you go from low volume for you, how would you adjust mid-volume or how would you adjust low volume?
I would always want to err on the side of caution. So you know how much stress you can handle, how much you're going to heap on top of that is going to be the variable. So I would trim that. I wouldn't commit to a higher volume plan so much as supplement the lower volume plan. And how you go about that is it's probably going to be with more lower intensity stuff. The intervals are already there in in the low volume plans. We already have 2 days of pretty high intensity, and then a third day even involves a decent amount of intensity. So that base is fully covered, and it's probably about all you're going to benefit from anyways. So I would just look to either choose longer versions of those high intensity rides if you think you can handle a little more intensity, if you think you can actually performance benefit from that, or simply add more mileage. Fill in your Wednesday, maybe your Friday, and make a long add or increase the duration of your Sunday ride.
If you're on the mid-volume plan, I also like you could remove the easy day, or with our workout variations thing you have on the website.
Trim it a bit.
Yeah, so you could go from, if it's a 90-minute workout, you go down to the 115. Or the 115 go down to the hour.
That's a good point. The way we've structured things, you can actually pick that higher volume plan and then just kind of tweak it downward a bit. That's just an acceptable way to go based on all the recommendations I just made. So just know that you're already getting enough intensity. So if you're going to further that intensity, it's going to be in one of the existing workouts already. Don't add another day of intensity. Simply bump up the demands of the already intense workouts.
So the opposite is low volume. You go to workout variations and you go up.
Yeah, exactly.
From an hour to an hour and 15, or from 115 to 130.
Yep.
And then you can kind of like manage it. It's all going to be individual, because like the 5 to 10, that too that's like a rule of thumb. Not even a rule of thumb. That was just for me.
It is. It's just a place to start.
Yeah.
It's just a reasonably safe expectation or recommendation.
I've got a handful of rapid fire ones.
Okay.
Number one, what is the logo on Chad's cap?
Yeah, what is that?
Oh, it's Axel Merck's team.
Yeah.
So was it Action Racing?
Action Hoggins Berman is the name of the team.
Is the team, but I think this is just
Axel's entity itself.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Axel Merckx, great guy, and kudos Axel Merckx for supporting Adrian Costa with that GoFundMe for his pretty grave situation that he had with his leg. So pretty sad. So good on you for running that hat too.
Thank you, Axel, and thank you, Greg Dumanoir.
Yeah, a few folks are asking how the Nokia the Nokia scales that you've been using compare to like the Tanitas that we use.
Oh yeah. So the body fat percentage is pretty much the same. I haven't gone from one exact to the other, but the reading is like the numbers that I'm seeing are what I would expect. Yeah.
Well, we know that Nokia stacked up pretty well with DEXA. So do you want to do like a side by side for a week or two?
Well, you know what? I have the Tanita here. I could bring it home and just step on one and step on the other and see what the differences are.
We'll let you guys know. And then another person is asking how do you find the size of bike that you ride? He says, I'm an odd build with being 5'11" and a 31-inch inseam. That's actually not too odd, Andrew. That's actually kind of par for the course. A little short on the legs, but it's at the Point Canyon size. Canyon's size finder says I put it in wrong. Canyon size finder I've found is broken because I try to put in what size I am, and every time it says that I've put it in wrong. So like no matter what height you are in, remember that you have the same thing. So don't trust that. If you're 5'11", chances are you are between a medium and a large, but slightly leaning toward a large in most cases, or 54 being medium, 56 being large. In most cases, that's what you would find. You can pick whichever one you feel fits best. If you have a 31-inch inseam, it may be better to go with a slightly smaller frame, so then you can just adjust with stem length to get the proper fit.
Don't employ the whole standover height thing, because now that we have sloping down to or top tubes,
it's all out the window. Yeah. And then the next one is from Michael. He says,
two on that one. I think a bike shop, like they can hook you up.
They can
most bike.
Well.
That's
what they do all day long. A bike shop can lead you very astray. Go
to like a bike shop in your area that deals with the kind of racers, and people are like, that's a good bike shop.
Yeah. So, but I'm telling you, if you're I'm 5'11", and I have a 33-inch inseam, and straight across the board, you could be a medium or a large. I ride a medium or a 54 out of choice, but I could ride a large too if I needed to. Lodajaw is this weekend, Michael says. Lodajaw is Logan to Jackson. That's a long race in Utah into Wyoming.
A couple 100 miles.
Yeah, 200-mile race. You've helped plenty of clients in the past prior to Trainer Road years and getting ready for that sort of thing. Really long race, and it's just constantly rolling. I think that it climbs like 9,000 feet over the 200 miles, so it's not like crazy climbing, but significant amount. How do I change my mindset from racing for a PR versus racing for a podium? I think... I guess that in this case, if you're the type of person that's just going out to have a good day and then actually going out to get a podium, I don't know. I mean,
you got to know your competition first off, and you got to know if what they're doing is within your reach based on how your training's gone to this point.
Yeah, this is something that in my mind you don't change in a week. This is something that changed long ago, right? Like mindset, you can't just flip it in a week. So I'm not sure if that's where you're sitting at on that, Michael.
It's going to come down to more than mindset. You have to actually have the physical capabilities too. But if you think they might be in line with what the people who are ending up on the podium can do,
then with longer races like this, I can't hit home enough to how important your physical capability is, because it's going to get whittled down to that. Like, no matter where your mindset is, you're going to get watered down to your physical capabilities in a long race like this. So whether you're going for a PR or you're going for a podium or you're going for whatever it is, a win, take a conservative approach to pacing on a long day like that, and it's going to pay off.
I was going to say the opposite. If you're PR, it's pacing. Podium, you stay with the race.
Yeah.
And then if you
If
go,
you can.
and well, then you go until you can't go,
sure.
and then you might get not finish.
Exactly.
That's like
that's the risk you take.
That's the risk. Like, you just hope that they're going to stop within the next 10 seconds, because this is, you know what I mean? That's the really,
that's a trade, yeah.
That's what Cody Kaiser said about cross racing. He's like, you just got to go with it. Because or else he's not.
Doesn't make sense.
Well, he's not. Yeah, but
any race. I mean, if you want to be on the podium, you have to do what the top contenders are doing.
Unless you think they're all going to blow up, like you could do the gamble where you think they're all going to blow up and come back.
When does that happen?
If you're racing for money, I get that approach. If you're not racing for money and you're an average Joe, I feel like a DNF or something like that is a much worse performance to have than to just go for a solid across the board. And you never know how many people are going to come back.
I will say this to you: at nationals, the mountain biking, if it starts out hard, you're just going to go with them. You're not going to just let them go.
To me, it's totally number one. I will let them go if I don't have the fitness to back that up.
Well, that's if you don't have the fitness, yes, but
and then number two, it's a short race, and I do feel like that changes things a bit. So, yeah.
Are you done with your rapid fires?
Go ahead.
Mark says Nate's volume is always so much higher than everyone else's. I think it happened in the last 2 episodes. Maybe something got touched.
Nothing's changed.
Well,
all the settings are even white outed in.
Maybe I'm more excited recently, and but Ian, let's work on this afterwards to turn my volume down so I can still speak gregoriously and enthusiastically.
Let's see.
Someone's happy that you did. Peter's happy you did Taku.
Oh yeah,
way to go, fella.
Yeah, thanks, guy. Appreciate it. Yep.
Thomas
Baby
says
steps.
You boys did good on the calendar.
Nice. Way
Thank
to
you.
go. If you want to get access to that, go to the beta group. Saw somebody asking for access to the Trainer Road beta group and said that they are a nice guy, they promise. So nice or not, you'll be approved. It just takes some time, I think, to get everybody in. So
Tim's looking for the food guide that I wrote down for the 800 grams of carbs that I did. It's in the Facebook beta group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have to search in there for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can search by posts that I've done, because I've only posted maybe 4 or 5 times, so it'd be easy to find.
Ken asks, I'd like to know more about Nate waxing his chain for Leadville. How did he do it and what did he use?
Oh, yeah. I'm wax for life now.
Yeah, we need to do a video on how to wax your chain.
I know.
We'll do that soon.
I'll say the short version of it. I use the Molten Speed wax, a crock pot, and then I take a brand new chain and I put it in a glass mason jar of mineral spirits, and I swish it around. And I find that for a brand new chain, because you got to get off the lube that comes from the factory, that it takes at least six batches of baths of it. So I shake it for a while, shake it, and I pour it out. And then I rinse it with water, and then I do another time. And total 6 times.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where suddenly it'll be perfectly crystal clear.
Yes.
I then put it on this, I have a coat hanger that has this hook in it. Let me do it this way. It has a hook in it, and then it comes out this way. And what I do is I thread the chain in on that coat hanger. I get the wax. I put it in the crock pot to high and let it sit for 2 hours, because you got to get over 180 or 190 degrees or something.
Yeah, I think 185 they say is the ideal temperature.
So I let it sit there for a long time. And then you could even let the chain sit in there while it's heating up. But then I put the chain in, and once it's hot, I swish it a bunch. And what will happen is you're supposed to get the chain dry before you put it in. I'm not patient enough. And any water, though, that comes into contact with the wax, you'll get popping noises.
Yeah.
And then wax will spray everywhere.
Yes.
And that hurts.
Yeah,
but it's worth the watt saved.
185-degree wax.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, once it comes out a little bit, it gets a lot cooler fast.
Yeah,
so just know you do that. And so I swish it until there's no more
bubbles.
Yeah, because then I'm thinking, all the water is now gone.
Not only water, but then also these pins and rollers, they do trap air in there. So when you see a lot of those bubbles coming out too, it's because the air is trapped between the pins and rollers.
Yeah. So you want to swish it a whole bunch. And swishing is very important because also in Molten Speed wax, it has the Teflon in it and it will separate. So the bottom will be black and the top will be wax, but you want to mix it all together. So you swish. And then after that, you kind of take it out, hang it up, let it dry, and then you put it into a solid line. You run your finger over it to break each link. Yep. Because they'll all be like really strong.
Your chain will be like straight. You could just hold it out in the air.
Yep. And you got to break each one.
Yep.
And it doesn't take long at all. And then I also wax the quick connects. Then once you do that, you're all ready to go. And then they just say warm up your chain. Like if you had a short time trial, you don't want to warm your chain up. You're warming up anyways for 15, 20 minutes, depending on the outside temperature.
Yeah, they say that's the break-in time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And now we have two crock pots, one for perfectly clean chains, which is for races, and another for training chains.
Yep.
So now for me to redo this process, I just take the chain off. I don't even clean it. You just dunk it right back in the wax, and you get kind of the wax on it melts. You get new wax on it, and you get the benefits of it being quiet and durable. But you might lose a water to efficiency because you're putting dirt back into that crock pot.
Kind of, yeah. Like if you wash your bike, you'd be amazed at how little wax or dirt and grime sticks into the wax.
I do a mountain bike race, and afterwards I touch my chain, and there is no dirt at all.
Yeah.
On it.
So as long as you like wash it off with water beforehand, your bike like normal. When you're putting it back in and dunking it in wax, you might not be adding hardly anything back in terms of grime.
But we're talking about
a
little bit.
Is the initial prep.
Yes.
It's getting that wax, that chain perfectly stripped takes the most time. Everything else, like I can. As long as you turn your crock pot on and walk away, it really takes me 10 minutes to do the whole thing.
The only thing you have to keep in mind is that if you're using like 12-speed Eagle chains, you do need to get a new link every time.
Yeah.
Don't trust anybody that says otherwise. We've tested this here. You can take an Eagle link, and then if you end up, breaking that link down and then taking it off and putting it back on the chain, the quick link, you can go back through with your fingers then and just barely pinch, and you can get those links to come undone. And that's not good. You do not want that. So you have to get a new link every time if you're doing 12-speed Eagle chains. Outside of that, I still actually just get new links every time. I don't like reusing quick links ever.
I just bought it. It's $4, I think, for like an 11-speed one.
Yeah.
And the amount of times, like how often I do this, once every 2 or 3 months, and a broken chain is such a catastrophic failure.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like we're talking about
huge
we're
crash.
talking $4 at the most every 2 months.
Yeah. You just skip that one coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
And buy the chain link.
Yeah,
I'd
agree with that. Then you also went deeper and you waxed your cassette. As well for lead
so
belt.
I waxed my rear cassette. I took that off and put it into the chain, and man, I had perfectly
How'd
smooth.
you clean that? Just clean it.
Sonic cleaner.
Basically.
Did I do Sonic Cleaner on that?
Yeah. Sonic cleaner
with Simple Green.
With Simple Green.
Yep. And it was so big, I had to like turn it a few times to get it perfectly clean.
Yeah, and
but
waxed.
I find the Sonic Cleaner does well for like dirt and grime with Simple Green, but the Mineral Spirits does great for the wax that comes on a chain, at least a SRAM chain out of the factory.
Okay.
Yep. Only thing you have to be careful with on those sort of cassettes is the fact that they have an inner sleeve that spins separate of the cassette. So if you use anything that's like too harsh of a cleaner on the cassette, then it can strip any sort of like a oil that's been or lube that's been placed in there. So, and that's something that can be pretty bad. I think they have like rubber seals in there that kind of keep it going, so you don't want to dry those out. Let's see. I probably have time for maybe one more. There's a lot of them this week. I just got a power meter for my mountain bike. Numbers are eye-opening. I didn't realize how hard mountain biking really is. How can I put my power meter to good use while mountain biking? There's no difference than what you would use for road. I don't necessarily govern my effort in the moment, like on a short little surge or something. Like I'm not trying to stay under a certain power target, but I do use normalized power and lapping. On a lap, I'll know that, I want to stay within this target. So just to make sure that I'm not going too hard on the first laps. I rarely have the problem of going too hard on the final laps. And if so, I'm not going to tell myself to calm down.
No such thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't go too hard on the final lap.
Exactly. So
that's the stage race.
Yeah.
I mostly see a power meter on a mountain bike as a tool for data accumulation. There's nothing I do on the trail that I govern by my power meter. Rather, I just analyze it afterwards and then use my power meter indoors to do the very structured stuff.
Depends on the race, right? Leadville?
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. Cross-country hour race?
No.
You just do what you got to do.
You just got to do it.
Depends on the length of the climb, though, too. If it's a 15-minute climb, then maybe I will.
I suppose you could. Yeah, for sure, on the sustained, more even climbs.
Carson City?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, for sure.
You even said, does no one have a power meter?
It was Noah Sears from MRP.
Long sustained climbs don't fall under that recommendation.
A lot of people question the utility of a power meter in terms of analysis, post-ride analysis of the mountain bike, because there's so many surges. It's just as applicable.
So much information.
It doesn't have to be
gleaned.
stable power to be useful.
Yeah.
So
Arthur, maybe leave it here too, says,
Cool.
wisdom per word ratio is very strong for Chad.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
always.
I try to be succinct.
Always. He makes up for us on the other end of the spectrum, huh, Nate?
Lots of words, little
That's
wisdom.
us. Yep. We balance Chad out pretty
Yeah,
well.
it's like I think it's a hair thing.
yeah.
The more hair you have, the more words you need to convey simple thoughts. I don't know.
Somebody,
It's a theory.
I think I'm going to end with this, says, I don't use Facebook and I don't want to be, so I'm not a part of the groups. We need a forum, somebody says.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
Great idea.
We'll leave it with that. Everybody, we'll talk to you all next week. Remember, you can catch us live. Next week will be Thursday at 8 a.m. Stay tuned to the Facebook podcast group for those that do want to join the Facebook podcast group because we're going to have some news coming on, some podcast stuff coming up soon. So stay tuned there, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.